If you're a speaker or coach, it's always important that you're learning what's going on in the industry and what's out there. And there's a lot of really good ideas out there. But let's face it, there's not always a lot of time to read every single book and all of the articles and things that are out there. So I'm going to do that and share some of the things that I found in these and maybe make some recommendations to you about some of the books and things that you could be reading and you should be reading. So let's get started. Today, I just actually finished reading this book here, which is called 40 Irrefutable Steps to Building a Speaking Business. Steve Gilliland, I think it's pronounced, and he's CSP. That means he's a certified professional speaker. Having read it, he's a member of the NSA. I was a member of the NSA as well. I don't recall if I ever met him. I might have. I think it's a great book, and as you can see, I've made lots of notes and things through here, but I want to just share with you a few of the things that I thought that he shared that were super useful. Obviously, if you want, go get the book. I have seen it on a couple different sites that you can get. This was written back in, I think it was 2014. Is that what we said? Yeah, 2014 is when it came out. So some of the ideas in it are maybe a little bit dated, but a lot of his ideas are great and they still work today. So I want to just share with you maybe, I don't know, about 7 or 8 different bullet points that I got from this book that I think would be useful for you. One of the first things that he shared that I think is important is one of the biggest edges that you have in your speaking business is your brilliance. And I've always been a contender for this idea that you don't really, like this idea of getting out of your comfort zone is less important than getting into your brilliant zone. Find what makes you brilliant. Why are people hiring you? Why are people paying you? Why do they seek you out over your competitors? And the more you can lean into that unique brilliance that you have, the better you'll do. And he talks about that at the beginning of his book, and I think that's great. One of the other things that I think is important that he mentions is he talks about the value of capturing video of you speaking, especially for speaking bureaus and event planners and meeting organizers. The reality is if they're asking you for a video or a sizzle reel or samples of your work, they want to know what you are when you're speaking. Obviously, that's what they're hiring you for. So it's important to when you are speaking, invest a little bit of money and get somebody to video you at a professional level so that you have something that highlights and showcases what it is that you do. Remember, they're hiring you as a speaker, so it only makes sense that they're going to want to see you do that in action. I think another thing that he shared that I thought was really, really good, he says, set yourself apart by placement and promotion. Now, promotion, we kind of know you can buy ads and there's organic marketing and, you get yourself all over the place too. But I think placement is something we don't talk about, which I think he did a really good job in here a little bit. It's not just a matter of what you're saying, it's where you're saying it. And it is kind of interesting that over the years as I've spoken, I've seen a lot of different speakers in different environments. And sometimes a really great speaker at the wrong event is not any good. But if you're at the right event and your information is at the right event and you're also on stage with the right other speakers and your materials are showing up at the right places, it really makes a difference. So don't neglect that idea of placement. I think that's really important, right? In fact, it kind of reminds me of when we were doing our movies, like when we did the Opus. In fact, in English, here's the German version of it anyways. Okay, when we did this movie, the Opus, I was actually, that's me on the end, old picture, but you can see here's Jack Canfield, John DeMartini. This is another one of our speakers. I don't think she's any longer speaking. Morris Goodman from The Secret, Marcy Shimoff. But the thing that was interesting about this is when I had done that movie and was featured alongside several of these other incredible experts in the industry, a lot of people, because of the placement of where I was, they had already given me credibility just because of who my peers were at that point. And that's been a really strong tool ever since. It's kind of like this idea of you're guilty by association. I want to share also another really cool point that he makes in here is to identify your direct markets that you're going to target. So in other words, who has your customers? And that reminds me of an experience that I had early in my speaking career and building my business career. I sat down with one of my mentors and I started asking him all these questions about, how I can market, how I can find my customers, how I can do this, how I can do that. And long story short, what he told me is he said, look for the people that already have your customers. And I think that this is kind of what he's saying here too. There are groups that are out there. There are organizations and associations and meeting planners who already have assembled the people who are your ideal customer. And I think as speakers, first of all, a lot of speakers I work with, the first thing that we have to fix when we're working with them is they don't really know who their core audience really is, who they're speaking with. But the second mistake is once they know who that core is, they don't know who has those people already assembled. And I think that's a really great insight that he shares here. I think also something that we often don't talk about is he admonishes speakers to focus on repeatable business. And customers that you need to grow your business are often already doing business with you. By the way, even though this is written more for keynote speakers rather than platform speakers, that's one thing I think is a real struggle for keynote speakers is that repeatable business, because oftentimes they'll come in, they'll speak to a company, they may or may not get a chance to ever speak to those same people again. Whereas a platform speaker, generally, because we're selling products, services, events, coaching, workshops, all of these things, we can build a relationship, and there really is massive power in that reoccurring kind of customer. When I first started as a speaker, I did a lot of keynotes for companies, and I would get paid, $15,000 to come out and speak to them at a single event. And then I wouldn't necessarily get a call from that group again, at least maybe for a year or more. But when I was doing the coaching and speaking part as a platform speaker, often I didn't get paid up front a lot, but because I could do the programs, I had some events that I was doing $250,000 in an event because people were coming back. We could build on that relationship, and then obviously through the funnel, we could increase the prices based on the new event that they were coming to, because they already had built skills and were now advancing in their progress, and we had built a connection with those people. So just keep that in mind. This idea of focus on repeatable business is really the foundation of having a successful speaking career. Another thing that I love from here is he talked about considering special events to promote your speaking. One of the things that he lists there is trade shows. I myself have done trade shows, everything from the small business franchise expos to, at the NSA, I actually had booths that are there, in the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. I had booths at their event. We had booths at a variety of different events. One thing that we also have found is that those booths are sometimes so successful that we've incorporated them into some of our events that we host with multi-speakers. So, for example, the speaker mastermind that we host, oftentimes we have sort of a trade show floor where people who provide services to speakers can set up there, but also many speakers do, so that they can use it as a way to promote what they're doing and engage in discussions with people who might be able to hire them. So I think that's a really good idea that, we often don't think out of the box in terms of promoting ourselves as a speaker, but a trade show is a great way to do it. And by the way, many trade shows also have the opportunity not only for you to have a booth at those events, like we did these health and wellness expos when we had the movie The Gratitude Experiment and How Thoughts Become Things come out, and they also had the ability for us to speak at that event too, as well as have a booth. And I think that was great because once you spoke, people could come back and meet you at your booth. And by the way, that's also things like the Best You Expo, and those guys do that as well. Just looking at the next note that I had here is it's very important, and this book talks about it, the difference between being a speaker and having a speaking business. The systems are really what makes the difference. So it's a different skill set for going up on stage and presenting as a speaker versus having those systems to now manage the leads that you get from those speaking events, turning those into other speaking events or customers that you would have. And so I think it's very important that you build those systems, and we'll talk about that another time, but he's got some really clever ideas in here as well. The next thing that I think is important, he asked simply, what is the reason previous clients may want to bring you back? And that is a good question to answer. If you're just delivering the same keynote every time, like a signature talk, I think that's kind of why, in my opinion, signature talks don't really work very well anymore. That was kind of a thing in the 90s and the early 2000s, where you could deliver a TED talk or a TEDx talk or a talk to a corporation, and that's kind of how it would go. But I think nowadays the clients that I'm seeing, both in corporate and also in the main kind of platform speaking world, they're expecting more of a connection. They're expecting more of a conversation where you're coming to help them solve problems, but it's something that there's more engagement. And so it's really difficult to have that happen when you're doing a signature talk, which is essentially a monologue. It needs to be a conversation two-way between two people. In fact, most of the way that teaching is now done from the stage, it's engaging the audience, not just talking at them. And I think there's some really good pioneers who helped that shift. And that also gives them a real reason to bring you back, because you have evolved and you know what the trends in the industry are and you know where they're going versus just coming and delivering the same talk. Now, I won't mention any names, by the way, but I did observe one fellow who I've been following him for a number of years, and we are somewhat friends. But I had a chance to kind of tour, do a speaking tour with him through a variety of cities. And I was a little bit surprised that after about the fourth city, I recognized he was delivering exactly the same signature talk, memorized monologue to that group. And I noticed that there wasn't as much connection. And there were even some people I saw in the audience and heard in the hallway later on, they'd said, oh, I heard him speak and he gave that speech already. And so we've got to recognize that the audience is expecting something new. And by the way, not just with this idea of new in terms of the presentation, but I think also new in terms of the products and services that you're offering at the back of the room. Have something that they can grasp onto that takes them to the next level and where they're going. The next two things that I'll just maybe finish on here, he talks a little bit about branding yourself as a speaker. I love that he talked about the 3 C's of branding, which is number 1, clarity. And I'm going to add clarity of message. Consistency, I'm going to add consistency of message. And consistency again, but consistency or repetition of your message. So again, clarity of message, consistency of message, and then consistency of seeing that message everywhere. I think that that's something that many speakers that I've observed over the years kind of don't understand, that consistency, especially if your message is so important. A lot of speakers that I've run into feel like they've always got to have something new and exciting to share every single time. Whereas yes, we just talked about having something new beyond what you have shared in the past, but it's still in the same lane. So all your lessons, if you will, that clarity of message needs to be in the same lane, even if there are new things that you're adding to that discussion about that. So for example, if you're talking about leadership, all your discussion should be in the lane of leadership, and you should continually evolve within that lane, but the message still needs to always be that niche, leadership, right? So that's important when building a brand. And then I think one of the things that I really liked about this book, they shared something that I thought was something we often don't think about as speakers, is pre-selling your products to the event organizer. So again, if it's a corporate company and they've got people in the audience, simply making the suggestion, it would be a good idea for everybody to have your book. Or it would be a great idea to have, if you do an online training that accompanies this material. And so that's something that I actually have been blessed with to see it work really well. In fact, it was interesting. I did an event a handful of years ago for a company in Canada called Taco Time, and they are basically like Taco Bell. I did their National Franchise Expo or whatever, or their training for all their franchisees. And they paid me very well to be there, and it was a great group. I loved them. It was super fantastic. But one of my favorite things that I learned, and this was, I don't know, probably about 2003 or something like this, after talking to them about what I was going to talk about, one of the VPs that was there said, well, is there something that we could give them before you come, just so they could get ready, learn a little bit about you, prepare so that your session would be most valuable to them? And I didn't even think about that. That was this guy bringing it up. And so I mentioned at the time that I had a book. And here's the thing that's kind of interesting about this is they ended up buying close to $35,000 worth of books from me before I even showed up. And so I think that's a good tool. So anyways, Steve's got a great book here. If you ever get a chance to pick it up, it's probably worthwhile. It's not a very long book, so it's an easy read, but it's got some pretty good ideas in it. So make sure you check that out, and we'll see you in another video where we talk more about tools for speakers.